We're in week 4 of our series, Eye of the Storm, and we're talking about different storms and we're talking about the ways that they affect our lives. Some storms are like tropical storms and they don't have a ton of damage. But some storms come in like a Category 5 or a tornado, an F5, and they're massively destructive. We've named the storms last week. We looked at one of the heavy-hitting storms and depression and doubt and despair. And I know it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride for some folks because truth be told, when you talk about storms, the destruction that it leaves behind, even if you're years past it, can oftentimes leave hurt and can leave scars. I wanted to finish up on a positive note. As we said last week, one thing every storm has in common is that there is a sunrise on the other end of a storm. And so this week I wanted to talk about what the other side of a storm looks like. I've titled today's message Mind Games. In some capacity, I try to talk about this subject 2 to 3 times a year because I believe it's actually one of the storms that is enveloping our country, enveloping our churches, and enveloping our homes. Our lives are affected and directed by our thoughts. You see, negativity is a thought mentality. The storm of negativity is a storm that is affecting everything around us. You can't get away from it. Turn on any newscast. I don't care which side you land on. Turn on the radio. Turn on the television. Go to the water cooler. Sit around and talk long enough with somebody. And what you'll find is this storm has enveloped our entire nation. And as we move into the holiday and the Christmas season, one thing I know is that this storm has the propensity to envelop your entire family. I'll give you a case in point. I was going to have a stage design this week, and I love stage props because it kind of allows you. And so I asked my wife politely 2 nights ago. She doesn't know I'm telling this story, so bear with me. I asked her 2 nights ago to bake me a blueberry pie. Blueberry pies are my favorite. I love blueberry pies. And she looked up at me and within a split second went, nah. I'm like, it wouldn't even be that ironic if she didn't own her own bakery. She was already baking. And I had the can of blueberries in my hand. And I said, I got the ingredients. You're all ready. And she goes, no, not doing it. Here's why. Many years ago, early in our marriage, she made homemade blueberry pie for me. We were young in our marriage, and she asked me what my favorite dessert was, and for my birthday, she baked this amazing pie, from scratch. Like, went and picked the blueberries herself, kind of from scratch. And I ate some of it. It was good. Loved it. But it sat in the refrigerator for a little too long, and so I had to throw about half of it away. I'm actually not a big, huge sweets eater. Well, the next year, we went up to her family's house, which was in Iowa, and there was a blueberry pie sitting there, and her aunt had made it, and I ate it, and man, it was awesome. God, it was awesome. I'm like melting your mouth awesome. Like, it was amazing, and I went on and on about how good this blueberry pie was. And then I looked at my wife, and I said, you ought to get that recipe. And she said, hey, Aunt Sherry, what's your recipe? She said, I bought a crust from Walmart and I dumped a can of fake blueberries in there. And I baked it. She hasn't cooked me a blueberry pie since. Holidays can be intense. Holidays can be intense. Think about this. Think about you got 50 people over. You argue about everything from who's cooking what to who's sitting where. Negativity, you can air grievances from years and years ago, and you may not air them to everybody else, but you know deep inside of you there is a resentment. And while the blueberry pie is funny, it's funny to me. It's still not funny to her, but it's funny to me. While the blueberry pie is funny, there's so many more things that hurt over the holidays that have cut us to the core that can actually create storms. In every situation, we've looked at storms throughout the Bible. We've looked at heroes of the faith like Elijah and Job and Jeremiah and David and Peter. And I mean, these guys, these are the ones that we tell Bible stories about in Sunday school, right? And in every single instance of every single one of the heroes of the faith, there was a moment in their life when their thoughts overtook their head. Their thoughts creeped in, despair, anxiety. One of them even was wanting to die. But here's the crazy thing. All of them had seen miracles from God himself. All of them were heavy hitters. But they allowed a thought to get into their head, which got into their heart, which drove them to a storm that most of them felt like at the time they couldn't get out of it. You see, our thoughts begin our storms. The perception of our storm, the perception of negativity, the perception of the family that's coming in, the perception of the lack of family that's coming in. When thoughts invade our head, it can go into our hearts, can go into our soul, and could create a storm that we can't control. Everything begins with a thought. Think about this for a second. Name me one sin that doesn't start with a thought. Name me one offense that doesn't start with a thought. Name me one disappointment that doesn't start with a thought. When we look at the named storms that we had, it's anxiety. It's a thought. Something is going to go wrong. Something's going to go wrong. They're not going to like me. I'm not going to get the job. They don't want me. And see, this is one I deal with a lot. Not too long ago, when I get stressed out, my neck muscles hurt. Well, I had radiation in the left side of my neck, so now when my neck gets tense, I could go from a tense neck, which means absolutely nothing other than I'm tense, to I'm writing my will and making videos for my kids because I'm about to die. Because a thought gets into my head and it's like, oh no, well, my neck's hurting, so obviously that's got to be cancer, right? Not that I pulled my neck, not that I slept on it wrong, not that I'm tense, but anxiety can do that. You can get into your head, oh my goodness, I've got to go over to this house and there's going to be a party and there's going to be a lot of people and there's going to be people I don't know. And the people that I don't know, when I walk in, they're all going to stare at me because I'm wearing something that I probably shouldn't wear. I don't even know what to wear. And oh my goodness, and before long, you're underneath the cover in a dark room and you refuse to go out of your house. It happens and it begins with a thought. Grief, same way. You can be overwhelmed with grief to the point where you can begin to think nothing will ever be the same. I can't ever get out of this hole. I can't go on without them. Hopelessness, depression, same deal, begins with a thought. Nobody loves me. We saw Elijah who just called fire down from heaven. Nobody. I'm the only one. Nobody cares. Nobody has ever been through what I've been through. Nobody would understand. It would be better if I were dead. It begins with a thought. All suicides begin with the thought of hopelessness and depression. Bitterness is a thought. Even more so in the church. We've been burned by church, or we've been burned by a pastor. Or we've had somebody come against us, or somebody says something about us negative, or somebody's gossiped, or somebody, and then it's like I'll never speak to them again. I don't even want to be in the same room as them. You know what? I'll forgive, but yeah, I'm not forgetting. And see, that's only half-hearted forgiveness, really, when it comes to that type of forgiveness. But we do it, and then when confronted with the whole verse of, if you don't, then God won't, it's like, oh, well, I did, but, and we let that bitterness and that thought. And see, the crazy thing about forgiveness is you can walk away from it, and you can feel like you've forgiven, but all of a sudden they pop back into your mind, and you can just feel your insides clench and well up, and that anger, that offense, again, just starts to roll. But it begins with a thought. The bitterness of past hurts in every relationship. The bitterness and the distrust that we take in to other relationships. You see, here's the crazy thing about all of these is you can't outrun them because they're your thoughts. You actually can't blame them on anybody else because they're your thoughts. You see, I get offended at church, and so I step out of church, and I'm going to go to another church, and then when I get to that church, you know what the crazy thing is? There's people in that one too. There's people in that one too. And I'm offended again, and I'm bitter, and now I'm bitter about the last church, and I'm angry at this church, and so I'm going to go to the next. And before long, you see this pattern, and the pattern ends up not being other people. Sometimes it's us. It's our thoughts. I jump from relationship to relationship because I'm bitter or I'm hurt. And I take my distrust into the next relationship because I obviously can't trust you because it's the last one. And you can't run from it, but we keep trying and we keep trying and we keep trying. You see, our lives are affected and directed by the way we think. Think about that. Almost every decision you make is based on a past experience or based on a thought. Our lives are directly affected by our thoughts. Our lives are directed. The directions we go in our careers, the directions we go in our relationships, the directions we go in our spirituality even, are often determined by our thoughts. Today I want to check out a storm story by a pretty big dude in the New Testament by the name of Paul. If you got your Bibles, turn with me to Acts 27. If not, we're going to throw it up on the screen. I use the New Living Translation, so that's where I'll be at. And I've just got Acts 27. I'm going to skip around a little bit because it's a pretty big story. So we struggled along the coast with great difficulty. So they're in a ship, and they're going down to a destination, and they're struggling down the coast. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall. And Paul spoke to the ship's officers about it. Men, he said, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. How often do we roll into a storm after great advice? I don't want to go there. It's not today's message. When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and they sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength called a nor'easter burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship in the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. The next day, as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew that began throwing cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and they threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and he said, men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You would have avoided all this damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me, and he said, do not be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said. But we will be shipwrecked on an island. There is all kind of stuff in this story that I could spend a ton of time talking on. But we're going to talk about the storm of negativity. You see, this is the single largest storm that's going to envelop us over the next few months. It's a storm that envelops us every single day in a world and a culture of armchair quarterbacks. I mean, how many of us yesterday sat in our chairs and said, oh, if he had or I wouldn't have? How many of y'all ever played quarterback? None. One. Got one. He's allowed to talk. But we'll sit there and we'll second guess coaches. We'll second guess decisions. And it's funny because it's on TV, but then we take that into our workplace, and we take that into our bosses, and we take that into our pastors, and we take that into our leaders, and we take that into every aspect of our life. We live in a culture where we armchair quarterback. You know what? If they would have We even look at our relationships, and we live in a culture where there's no personal responsibility because it can't be my fault, right? Because if they would have, then this wouldn't have happened. We become accustomed to saying things behind a keyboard we would never say to somebody's face. We're critics of everything. And I believe that the root cause of every named storm, I believe the root cause of anxiety, I believe the root cause of depression, I believe the root cause of hopelessness, bitterness, and anger is negativity. It's negativity. You see, Paul in this story could have easily just said, hey, I told you guys, so let's just give it up. We might as well just sink. But he didn't. He did say, hey, if you'd listen to me, but God is going to come through. But God is going to deliver us from this storm. You see, that's a huge but God. In whatever storm you're going through today, I want you to understand that there is a but God. Psychologists say that there are 3 types of negative thinking. The first one is all or nothing thinking. It's all or nothing thinking. Every Monday is horrible. All Mondays are horrible. Nobody cares about me. You never listen to me. You see, we can project this on our kids a lot of times too. You're never going to get it right. You're always going to be. It's always your pattern. And see, that's just not true. But negative thinking can take us to an all or nothing thinking. It can also take us to an overgeneralized thinking. Overgeneralized thinking. It's a one-time event that now blankets everybody. That one guy, that one girl who messed around on you or betrayed you, and now all men or all women. How about that one Christian that was mean to you? Now all Christians are like that. How about that one taco that... Never mind, we won't go there. But we can overgeneralize our thinking, and we can put everything in a category off of one simple hurt. And the third one is this. It's negative filter thinking. You only see the negative in every situation. Oftentimes we would call this the glass is half empty negative thinking. You can walk up to somebody who just bought a new truck and they're excited and the truck looks great, and all you can think about is, hey, you know what? That insurance is going to cost you a lot more. Some of y'all who were complaining about the heat wave and the drought and how dry it was are now complaining because it rained 2 days in a row. Right? It's negative filter thinking. Your mind filters out all of the positive thinking. A whole room of people worshiping, and all you can focus on is the footwear somebody's wearing, or the pitch that may be a little bit off. And here's the problem with negative filter thinking is this: you're not worshiping. You're not enjoying God's goodness. You're not enjoying God's beauty in nature because you're so consumed over the cloud. But it's negative filter thinking. And it's all about what everybody else is doing, not what's going on in me. 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5 says it like this: for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought. And so we use that verse a lot. We take captive every thought, but we don't usually finish that sentence. It says we take captive every thought, and then what? We make it obedient to Christ. Say obedient. See, it's good to capture it, but then there's a follow-up to it. We make it obedient to Christ. So how do we get out of negativity? How do we get out of the storm of negativity? The first thing that we do is we've got to fix our focus. We've got to fix our focus. Philippians 4:8 says it like this: and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about the things that are excellent and worthy of praise. So if we take a thought, if we capture a negative thought, our next step is to make it obedient to Christ. So we capture it, and then we focus on what is true. What is true? You know what? Not everybody is against you. Not everybody. All Mondays aren't awful. Some Mondays definitely are. Some restaurants, definitely you get sick in. Some churches, you're going to have a bad experience, but not everyone. We take our thoughts and we think about what is true and what is honorable. You see, here's the truth of it. You become what you focus on. You become what you focus on. If you only focus on the negative, you will become a very unpleasant negative person. But if you think about what's the positive, if you think about what's true, if you think about what's righteous, if you think about the beauty of Christ, not just in nature, but in every single person, you know what you become? Christ-like. We take our thoughts and we become, we focus on what is truth. The truth about anxiety. One of the big storms, 90% of what you're anxious about isn't ever going to happen. We don't have to be anxious because we can freely talk to God. We can freely cry out to our Father, and He will hear us. So if you suffer from anxiety, it's not everything's going to go wrong. As a matter of fact, it's going to go right because you're crying out to God, and He can deliver you even from the storm. Philippians 4:6 says this, don't worry about anything. There you go. There's your cure for anxiety. Stop worrying about it. It says don't worry about anything, but pray for everything. Pray for everything. When you fix your thoughts on what is true, it's not everything that can go wrong. It's I'm going to spend time talking to my Father in heaven who makes everything okay. I may not be where I want to be, but man, I'm so much farther than I used to be. I may not, it may still scare me to death to walk into a room full of people, but you know what? I'm going to walk in, and the entire time I'm walking in there, I'm going to be talking to my heavenly Father. Suffering with grief, want to know how to fix your mind on what is true? Psalm 56:8. You keep track of all of my sorrows. You have collected all of my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one on your book. You keep track of my tears. God is close enough to you in that time of grief. God is close enough to you in that valley of the shadow of death that He is counting your tears. They are important to Him. So when you get that thought from the enemy that God, you've left me, God, you've forsaken me, God, I feel lonely, that's the opposite is true. He says, I'm right here. Not only am I right here, but I'm close enough to count every tear down your cheek. Not one single tear is lost. Fear? You suffer with fear? Here's the truth. Here's what's obedient. John 14:27. I am leaving you with a gift. I'm leaving you with a gift. This is Jesus. I'm leaving you with a gift. Peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give you, the world cannot give you. I'm giving you my peace. You don't fight it the way the world fights it. You fight it the way God fights it. And He has given us a spirit of peace. Worth? You don't think you're worthy? Here's some truth. I knew you before you were even knitted in your mother's womb. I set you apart for a plan and a purpose far greater than anything you can imagine. So when the enemy gets in your head and it's like, I'm not worthy enough, my past is too bad. What if they knew what I'd done, if they knew what was in my thought? All of that's a lie straight from the pit of hell. God says, I created you for a plan and a purpose, and you have worth. You don't have to be what they spoke over you. You don't have to live under that labels. And the same is true about value. The same is true about value. I've made a mistake and now I'm not valuable and nobody loves me and nobody cares. 1 John 3:1. See how very much our Father loves us, for He calls us His children, and that is what we are. He calls us His children. You don't think you're valuable? You're a child of the Most High God, created in His image. Created in His likeness. He loved you so much, He sacrificed His only Son. How much more love can you get? You see, when we fix our thoughts on things that are true, Paul was in the ship and they were throwing stuff overboard and the waves were high and the storm was raging. They gave up all hope. And Paul said, hey, here's you some truth from my Father. You're going to make it through. And you're going to survive. You see, I think oftentimes when we're in a storm, we lose truth. We lose perception. And here's the truth. No matter what the storm is, there is the other side. Fear, worth, value. Oh my goodness, can I tell you something? Your picture is on God's refrigerator. Think about that for a second. Think about that. He's sitting up there with Jesus, and Jesus is going, yeah. Man, I'm proud of that one. Golly. What about hurt? What about those words? Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. And let me handle the consequences. Insecurity. Lean not on what you can understand. In all ways, acknowledge Him. God, I have no idea. Their ship was adrift in the sea. Oh, I don't even know where I'm going. I got this. I got this. Hopeless. Hopeless. You feel like you want to give up. You've thrown everything overboard. You're just ready to sink. Come to me, all who are weary. Come to me, all who are tired. I know this morning there's somebody in here today. You're just tired. You're exhausted. Come to me. Come to me. Rest in me. Trust in me. The second way you can get out of the storm of negativity is stop comparing yourself to people who aren't meant to be the standard. For all you moms who are comparing yourself to Instamoms who parent through the edit button, think about that for a second. Can I tell you there's not a better mom in the world than you? Can I tell you there's not a better mom to be parenting your child than you? Dads, there's not a better dad to be parenting your child than you. Stop comparing yourself to other people who aren't meant to be the standard. You know what? I look and I go to these baseball fields and I watch. Here's the truth of it. Not every parent needs to know how to throw a curveball. But what I see is I see a lot of moms who bring these huge wagons loaded down. Right? You look like you're going on an 8-month vacation. You got these huge wagons, and you set up these tents, and you got all this stuff, and you got rucksacks and backpacks, and you got a dad out there who just got off of work, and he walks up, and he takes his fanny pack off, and he puts his ball cap on. And here's what I know about that, is that you are the best parent for your child. You're the best parent for your child. Your child doesn't have to be a Major League Baseball player. Your child doesn't have to be the starting quarterback. Your child has to know that his mom and his dad love him. You don't have to know chord charts. I look up here every week and I watch these guys rip on an electric guitar, and I'm like, man, I want to do that. I'm not called to do that. Me comparing myself to Mike? Yeah, okay. Dude, I don't even know what a chord chart is. I just say it to make myself sound smart. I don't have to be a good mechanic. I know what a flux capacitor is. But I need to love on the one who's in the garage. I don't have to compare myself. I don't have to be Chris Hodges. The pastor, that direction doesn't have to be me. God created you to be you, and you're in the best position. And here's why, because He put you exactly where He needs you. You see, better is relative to purpose. God created you for a plan and a purpose. When you can get comfortable with the place God has placed you right now for this moment, you can begin to defeat the storm of negativity. Gene, come on up as I finish up with this. Here's the third point of how to defeat the storm, is you got to know this. It will get better. it will get better. Hebrews 6:9 says it like this, dear friends, even though we are talking this way, we really don't believe it applies to you. You see, they're writing to a church, and a lot of churches at this point, they were distraught because the government was coming at them, and they were starting to be persecuted, and they were distraught, and they had gotten into this negative mindset of we're never going to make it. But he says this, he says, we are confident that you are meant for better things. We are confident that you are meant for better things that come with salvation. You were meant for better things. It's going to get better. And here's what you need to know. Sometimes the most painful circumstances are the most purposeful. I use this verse all the time. They defeated the enemy. They defeated Satan. By the crucifixion of Jesus and the power of your story. You know what? Your storm story, we've watched them week after week. Your storm story changes eternities. That pain you're going through now will one day help somebody go through it. We do membership for that reason. When I talk about it, we go through storms. There's some of you who have been hurt. There's some of you who have been through a storm. There's some of you who have been through divorce. There's some of you who have been through grief. There's some of you who have been through some of the most painful storms. Some of the most disastrous storms that you could go through. And you're on the other side of that. And here's the truth of it. Somebody needs to hear your story. And here's what I know. If you're sitting in here this morning, you made it out. You made it out. It will get better. Tomorrow will be a little brighter than today. Storms make us stronger. Peter's sinking in that storm. One day, Jesus knew. You see, Jesus let him go out into that boat, and he let that storm hit. He even told him, come on out. And don't think for a second he didn't know that he wasn't going to sink. He knew. And there would be one day later in Peter's life, as the rock of the church, when he was facing death and he was facing persecution, that he was going to have to think back of that storm, and he was going to need to remember Jesus reaching his hand out in the middle of a storm. Peter, I never said there wouldn't be a storm, but I did say, I'll never leave or forsake you. Paul would need the memory of this storm, because one day he would be sitting in a prison, and he would be facing death, and he would need to remember on that dark, lonely night, when the waves were high and they were hanging on for dear life, and all hope was lost, that there was hope on the other side. To be absent from the body is to be with the Lord. Even in the face of death, Paul needed to remember. It'll get better in eternity. Elijah, he needed 3 storms to remind him that, hey, I'm so close to you, you can hear me whisper. You can hear me whisper. And I get it. I get it. Storms are awful. And they're loud, and they're chaotic, and they're painful. But here's what you need to know. It will get better. Fix your focus on what is true. Fix your focus on the one who can calm the storm with a word. Fix your focus on the one who said, hey, I sent you into the storm, but I'm right here. Fix your focus on the one who is counting your tears. As our ushers come forward and we enter into communion, I want you to think, as our worship team comes up, I want you to think, past, present, future. I want you to think about that storm. I want you to think about those words that were said. I want you to think about that hurt that was caused. I want you to think about whatever storm you've been through, whatever hurt you've got. And I want you to fix your focus this morning. Jesus said, this is my body. I've been broken, so you don't have to live broken. And I get an amen on that. He said, this is my blood that covers all of your past. You don't have to live in that anymore. You don't have to live with the thoughts of negativity. He said, I sent my son for you. So today, as you come and get your stuff, and as you come to the altar, here's what I want you to do. I want you to cry out to the one. I want you to cry out to the one who can calm your storm. I want you to name your storm at the foot of the Father and see the miracle He's going to do in your life. Because this is what we know. It will